Metaprogramming is writing code that helps you write code. Or actually, writing code that generates code sometimes. It depends on the language. We get started about metaprogramming. Ruby, everything in Ruby is an object. Classes are objects, numbers are objects, everything is an object. Okay, so it's a very important aspect about the Ruby programming language. So here's a class. We're pretty much like editing the fixed num, which is the number. You can edit any class that exists, and you can modify it. So here we go. Any fixed num, if we put 2 LBP, it's going to convert it to the number itself multiplied by 1500. So basically, you have 2 LBP, 2 USD, etc. And the problem with that is like you have a lot of currencies, and if you want to make it easy to code, you know, you're going to have to put a function, make a mapper probably, and do a conversion for every function. It's not easy to code like while having the function, do like pass a parameter to it. I don't like it anymore. It's too, you know, old days. So, so here, when we're going to execute the program, we're going to see that one.class is fixedNum. FixedNum.class is actually class. A class is an object itself. So it's an instance of the class class. And then, so here we have like 10.2LBP and 10,000.2 USD, like the functions that I created above. It's gonna call them, like when we execute, we're gonna see that. But I want to make something that's much easier to execute. So what I did here is, if you take a look at here, there's like currencies. It's a static variable here, and then I can list all the currencies inside of it. And there's something in Ruby called method missing. This is like one of the most important things about in metaprogramming. Method missing is whenever you call a method on a class or on an object and it doesn't exist, this method missing can be called. So if you override it, you can do whatever you want inside method missing. So here it looks inside the currencies. It checks if there's, you know, the currency that we pass the function to. So here, if you can take a look here, I have 15.eur or 15.can. So these methods do not exist on the class. What we're doing here is method missing is going to get called, and it's going to get the parameter eur as a method. So we're going to execute the code to see what happens here. And you see it works. So this is a very quick intro to method missing. If you care more about it, you can look it up. We're going to try another program here. It's meta 1. Okay, here, I know everybody has this problem. Like every time you want to create getters and setters, for example, you go ahead and code it for every getter and setter. And new programming languages, or like they have like extensions that allow you to create macros and stuff. But here's how you do it. You create define old name, it returns my old name, and then define old names equals setter. This is setter, this is a getter here. And so initializers do the same. So here's what Ruby does. Ruby has a method that's called Accessor, for example. It creates whatever you pass to it. It creates the setters for us. We're going to create a method just like it to show you how this works. So this is like just a simple person.new, put name, and then old name is like the old function that we created. Okay. Okay. It works. Okay, here's how we're going to create Accessor. So a method that generates accessors for us. It's a very basic thing here, but you can use it for something that's more evolved. For example, active record, it maps the database to functions, so you don't want to be, or like if you want to generate a JSON object, you don't want to go through every single attribute name and say, hey, this is the attribute name, and then I'm gonna copy it into the JSON and convert it. So it takes forever. If you guys have worked with that, like you probably feel the pain. So here we're editing the class. So every class is now going to have a method called accessor_new. What this does is I pass to it like a certain number of parameters here, and then I loop through them, and then it creates a method for each one of them. Actually, the accessors. Here's how I'm doing it. Like I'm defining a method with the name of I, which is the parameter that's looping through. And then here I'm creating the setter, and I'm doing class eval, just like eval in JavaScript, but here there's an eval on objects. Class eval does it on classes. And here's the new class person, and I'm using my generator, which is going to generate a name and age accessors like setters and getters. So let's try it out. Okay, it created the method name and the method age, and then it worked. All right, so now we're going to do something that's a little bit more evolved. Okay, so in Ruby you have active record, which is a data mapper from a database to classes. And so I created a database object person. Okay, so person.first calls MySQL here, as you can see. It calls select people, and then it returns the first person. Every class has person.findById, like find by ID, you need to pass to it an ID. Or you can do like person.find, actually, this is actually Ruby generated. It uses method missing to create a method for everything in there. So find by name, for example. It gets generated live there. So Ruby generates all these methods for us. Actually Rails and active record. All right, so here's one of the problems that I usually faced. I usually face the problem of like, every time I want to create a class and I want to cache certain objects, I need to create a cache. I need to create, I need to refresh the cache when something is, added to the database. I need to refresh the cache when something gets modified. I need to refresh it every time something happens. And this is problematic in web server applications. And every time you want to refresh, it's making a call to the database. And I don't want to get the data from a database. I want to cache it. So this is what I did here. Okay, so this is a class person. I created something called autocache, and then I give it find by ID, and then it does everything for me. Whenever something gets added to the persons in database, person.find by ID actually gets cached. It doesn't query the database, it brings it from memory. Everything that changes, let me show you how to do this. So person.find by ID is the one that we just queried. This calls for a database. Just get some space here. So person.find by ID1, let's store this in a variable. And then person.cache, this is what I created, find by ID1. It's gonna bring it from a cache. The second time, here you can see here, it queried database. Second time I call it, it didn't query database. Okay? So now I'm not gonna touch the cache, I'm just gonna change the person itself. So I'm gonna say a.name equals Samir. Okay, save. It's gonna push to the database. But now I'm not gonna bring it from database, I'm gonna bring it from my cache object, make sure everything works fine. Okay, first it brought it from database now that it changed. So my metaprogram saved me a lot of time. You know, like I have this problem myself, like every time I code a class, I need to cache it, especially for database-oriented objects. All right, so this is pretty much it for Ruby metaprogramming. Who's next? Oh, questions? So my name is Abdo. I'm the founder of Znoot.com. You can check out the website. On LinkedIn, you can find me. Or call Samir.